Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Wherever you are in the world, welcome back to The Caring Economy with Toby Usnik. Today is my most special guest ever. I'm interviewing my dad, Neil Vogler, the man who raised me and my four brothers throughout our lives. He's now in the final stages of his life. He's actually in hospice, and we're together here in San Antonio, Texas. We have some time yet together, and we want to capture a little bit of his take on the role of business in society. We profited as a family from his having spent the bulk of his career as a chemical engineer with BASF, the big German chemical conglomerate. And I thought it would be really interesting to have his insight about how the world of business has changed or not for the better during his career and after. So welcome to The Caring Economy, Dad.
Thank you very much, Toby. Always glad to be here and with you.
It's really quite special. Dad, so in my show, I always ask people about their personal narrative. How did they get where they got in life, and who maybe mentored them, where they hit some knocks and sort of picked themselves up by the bootstraps rather. I wonder if you might tell us a little bit about your narrative. How did you get into chemical engineering and then become a, so to speak, corporate gypsy?
Okay. Background. My junior and senior year in high school, I had a super excellent science teacher, Chief Biden. I'm trying to think. I really don't remember by his first name because everybody called him Chief. But he was an excellent teacher in physics and especially chemistry. He was teaching us. He was teaching me routines in chemistry that I didn't pick up until I was really in college. So with that background, I took some tests at Michigan Tech, which was a engineering school close to home. I say close to home, Sault Ste. Marie.
Because you were born in Upper Michigan, Lower Peninsula.
Rogers City, Michigan.
Yep.
Minor detail. But during the rundown, I had I'm going to say it, not a knack, but had an interest in economics and in science. So one of the doctors I talked to at Tech said, engineering, and since I like chemistry and physics, to go with chemistry. So I kind of got into that and pursued it. Graduated in 1961 from Michigan Tech with a degree in chemical engineering.
Yep.
Interviewed a number of places. Ended up with an offer for a chemical company, Columbia Southern, which was a division of Pittsburgh Plate Glass, the chemical division.
Or PPG, yep.
And PPG, excuse me. And I accepted the offer and started to work in the Barberton, Ohio plant as a chemical engineer in the chlorinated solvents plant. Worked that trichloroethylene. Worked that for a while as an area engineer, and then transferred to a chlorine plant as an area engineer. Let's see. While I was there, I got interviewed for a position in technical service, working out of Pittsburgh. So it was a step up. So I took that with exposure with the company and moved to Pittsburgh in the technical service and bounced around there for a while. And I'll be back in Akron for a weekend visiting friends. I went out for dinner at a restaurant we both knew, and ran into saw another couple, two gals, having dinner, and my friends, Rod and Cookie Parkhurst, knew these two gals. One was Sally Usnik, and the other one was
Carol, was it?
Carol. Yeah.
Carol Kahida?
No, not Carol Kaitis. Good Lord, I can see Sonny and Sherry, but anyway, being a young gentleman, I went over and I thought I'd give these two young gals a hand. They were having a lobster tail, and I give them a hand shelling the lobster, and got talking to them. And look back at the table I came from. My friends Rod and Cookie had left.
Left you with the girls.
And left me with the girls. So one of the girls agreed. I guess they both had driven up, yeah, because Carol and Sally was by herself, and so Carol was living someplace else. So they both drove up. So Sally offered to drive me back to the bar where we had left my car, and she dropped me off, and for some reason we ended up talking. And I remember Herb Shake blew the siren at 3:30 in the morning, saying that he was shutting the lights out and it was time to vacate his parking lot. So we kind of left our way, went part of our ways with, I'm saying we, Sally and I, but I went back to Pittsburgh, and she was in the Akron area, and I found more reason to go to Akron, more and more and more, and finally it was I asked for a transfer back to engineering. For some strange reason, I'd rather be in Akron than driving back and forth on weekends. So the next thing I knew, I was just a young lad at the time.
But smitten with Mom.
There's something about this young gal coming back and just really said, this is something really special.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked her to marry me.
And for our audience, we need to know that Sally was widowed with 5 boys. And so it wasn't just taking on a woman you were smitten with, but 5 young sons.
And it was kind of a joke that she didn't tell me she had 5 boys until after we were married. But I bounced around quite a bit. I mean, I was in engineering and at Barberton, Ohio, and my boss my boss and I were okay, but I'm going to call it his supervisor and I just did not hit off. He had a different set of values than I did, and we didn't agree. And I said, I think I should look for another job, which I did. Mm-hmm. And I hired on with a company called Wyandotte Chemical. Mm-hmm. in the Wyandotte, it was just an area just south of Detroit. Mm-hmm. And with a job as a project engineer, working for a extremely good, Tom was a good friend as well as my boss, Tom Frydenwer. And I traveled to a couple of plants. You
joined Wyandotte Chemical?
No, Wyandotte Chemical.
And you liked your boss, Tom? He shared your values?
And let's see, the general, Wellington, was head of engineering. He and I didn't see the right way that I had authority to approve $500, and I'm working on projects and responsible projects in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, but I could only approve 500. And I thought that was bad news. And at this time, married, living in Groseal, I got to know a number of friends. One of them happened to be Marty Paulson, who was a marketing manager in the chemical division, and we're kicking around talking about responsibilities and frustrations. And Marty said, maybe you should do something in marketing.
And was this with Wyandotte Chemical as well?
This is with Wyandotte Chemical.
And was Wyandotte Chemical a subsidiary of BASF, or was that
Nope.
come later?
Nope.
Okay.
When I joined Wyandotte Chemical Engineering, maybe about 6 or 8 months later, BASF acquired Wyandotte Chemical.
Mm-hmm.
So coming back to Marty Paulson, Marty said about, well, maybe you should try something else, like maybe marketing. And he also made it much more attractive from a monetary standpoint, which was not a problem. So I took a transfer from engineering, from a project engineer to a assistant product manager in industrial products,
mm-hmm.
Which included chlorine, a number of other
Well, chemical substances, because that's the nature of the business.
Anyway, yeah. And worked in that for a while, maybe a couple months or whatever. And I'm trying to think, I made a move from the industrial products to the surfactant area. And that was going okay, but a different boss, Hal Rice, he was okay, but he's totally different. John Tremonti was a good boy, stuck up for his people.
Mm-hmm. Not a lot of women at work right then, were there?
No.
All right. So there you are. You're moving around, trying different jobs within the company.
And at about that time, the sales manager, Gus Goins, who was a good old Southern boy, said, one thing I didn't have was sales experience. And I would agree that was an open area. So I accepted a position in sales,
mm-hmm.
which made a move to Chicago.
Mm-hmm. Ladies and gentlemen, again, today we're interviewing my stepfather, my dad, Neil Vogler, who spent most of his career in chemical engineering with BASF, the German conglomerate. And we're talking about his life and career around corporate America in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. So, Dad, you were just about to transfer the whole family out to Chicago.
Right.
Our first big move. The corporate gypsies began.
Sales, and we moved into Northbrook, Illinois. I had a 5-state territory. And in Northbrook, we ran into some new neighbors and turned out to be really, really good friends for a long, long time until they both passed away. Ben and Willie Walsh.
Mm-hmm. And
through Ben and Willie, we got to meet the Eroskins.
From London, yep.
From London. And
as I recall, you all shared your obsession with bridge. So throughout your adult lives, these three young families regularly got together, not so much for friendship, but for bridge.
Yes. And
I joke, you were friends and remained friends.
Alana and Mert was with the British Airways.
Mm-hmm.
And they were here in the States, and their kids were going to school in London, and Alana was going home to visit the kids, and on BOAC,
which is the precursor to British Airways, British Overseas Airline Corporation. Yep.
She asked if Sally wanted to go along, and at no charge. And I said, okay. Sally was an excellent housekeeper, super organized. She had meals planned ahead, whatever. And she agreed. And I said, we'll work it out. I can work calls in the Chicago area versus being out of town, all that kind of stuff. And she left, and just before she left, I get a call that the company wanted me to come back to the Detroit area for a week of what they called sensitivity training. And I said I couldn't. And they said, well, if I liked my job, I would.
So much for sensitivity.
Anyway, for a long time, for a short time, what the hell am I going to do? Sally was getting ready to go. We had some neighbors. Let's see, Jerry. I can't remember his last name, but he was a real jerk. But his wife was very nice, and we had met. I'm going to say Gretchen. It wasn't Gretchen. But anyway, we had met the wife's mother, and she was widowed, retired. And I said, would she be willing to babysit the kids? And not so much babysit it, but I would pay her.
5 young boys.
5 young boys. She said, oh, she'd love it. So, okay. And it wasn't free. I said, how much would you expect me to do? She said, oh, you don't need to pay me. I said, I will pay you something. So I went back to the company. I said, here's the situation. My wife's gone. I can't make it. You're saying I must be there. I've got a housekeeper, but she'll charge $50 a day. The company said, okay. So Sally was off to London. I was off to school. And
can you tell us what sensitivity training meant in the 70s at BASF? Was it about race or gender or something else?
The funny thing was basically it was how to get along with your boss. And I always thought it was kind of funny in retrospect that one of the guys in the session was there with his boss. And it's like, how can you be open and have an open discussion when you might have to criticize your boss?
Correct. You're intimidated.
So, it was basically the whole idea of the sensitive was an awareness of others.
Yep.
And
now it does seem to me, Dad, though, that your overall experience with BASF was quite positive, and that it was a very forward-thinking corporation.
Without a doubt. I mean, Wyandotte Chem was not backwards, but they didn't have the kind of in retrospect, the people I knew that were with Wyandotte and stayed with Wyandotte, I don't want to say they were good old boys, but there was a sense of loyalty to the company and to their people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something over a period of time, I think a lot of companies, corporate America has lost.
Yes.
That people are not really all that important. And unfortunately that, I'm going to say it comes down to money is.
The money, the salary to the employee or the shareholders' profits?
Really to the shareholders' profits.
Yeah, that dominates.
The care for people isn't there the way it was before.
Yeah. Well, I wonder if in hindsight, did BASF function purely for profit of its shareholders, or did you have a sense as an employee that they were in fact vested in you and your family? It seemed to me that they were vested in our well-being.
Yeah, mixed emotions, because they were my experiences. There's a lot of play with individuals, but there were also instances where money was more important.
Yeah, well, I can remember as an example when it was quite exciting for us as kids, but also in the mid-70s, you were on strike duty in Baton Rouge. And the whole family went down there for part of the summer, which for us was like a very fancy holiday. But for you, you were there filling a gap, I guess, right?
Well, that's when I found out family meant one person.
What do you mean by that?
Having been down in Louisiana for like 3 weeks, whatever, someone in the company decided that you couldn't work longer than 3 weeks without having some time off. And you could either go back home and visit family, or your family could come down and visit you. Family was one person, and you'd be off for 3 days. And I kind of told them what they could do with that, but once the scabs, which was what we referred to us to, said once we got the time off, they had a meeting. The company said that would not be, it would be considered as time worked, but not at the pay that
you're accustomed to.
The scabs were getting.
Mm-hmm.
And that took about, I remember having a meeting in the main office at the Geismar plant. And I talked to my boss and I said, now I know why the union's on strike. And as far as I'm concerned, I'll come back. I mean, if I can just have my wife come down. My wife is not my only family.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's sort of like your Norma Ray moment when you got up on the chair.
Yeah,
and said family is more than one.
That was turned around in the favor, but they didn't change the statement that family was only one person. So I said, to hell with it. So I had my family come down, they did pay for Sally, but I paid for everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
And during the time working in a chlorine plant,
during strike duty, yep.
During strike duty, I had grown a beard. It was kind of as a safety precaution because of the possibility of acid spills and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So when they picked the kids up at the airport in New Orleans, Geismar was between
Baton Rouge and
New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
I had this white beard. It scared the hell out of the guys. I didn't know who in the hell this white-haired old man was, because my beard came in white.
Still is.
It still is.
And I must say, you wear it well.
Who's this white-haired guy trying to hug me? But the company was paying a per diem plus meals to all of us while we were down there. And I got a arrangement where I made a deal with the hotel for 2 rooms for the family. And it kind of, one of the rules was when I came home from work, hotel, 1 room was mine. They had to Sally and the boys had to vacate.
Mm-hmm.
So I could sleep. Then I go back. I was working a 12-hour shift, 7 days a week.
Wow. But for us, it was quite an exciting time.
Yep.
We got to go to New Orleans and Baton Rouge and ice cream factories and see a part of the world. So
and we made some very good friends. Made a very good friend. Chu at the hotel. I mean, he was just super.
Yeah, he was the waiter there who was studying, and then from Malaysia.
Right, and he came back and visited us over Christmas, and I had an occasion to go out of town on business. Take a company airplane, fly into Pennsylvania, run a test on the product, and I'd be back the same day. Well, this is right around Christmas time, and So I didn't tell Sally I was going to be out of town, because I really was. I'd be going out the same day and
Back the same
coming
day.
back the same day. Not a problem. So the guys were cleaning out the fireplace from Christmas, and they didn't make sure that all the
ashes were
ashes
cold.
were cold, so they dumped hot ashes into the
The
trash can.
Mhm.
And fortunately, the garage door was open. It caught on fire. And when I say it was fortunate, the garage door was open because the neighbor across the street saw that and said, we've been a kind of crazy family. People coming and going all the time.
Asian people and other things.
Whatever. And just happened to call the house or whatever, and said, I think you should know that your garage is on fire. So Sally, Todd was coming home from his one of his older brothers was coming home from the grocery store when the fire truck was running by. And
only to realize that it was his house that was on fire.
It was at my house, his house. And Sally had called me at work. And my secretary said, no, he's not here today. And it's like, what do you mean he's not here today? I was out of town. I was unavailable. I came back to a very verbal
assault by your wife. The house on fire, you're not around.
Yeah. I don't know if we can use this or not being edited, but it was a good ass chewing. It's something like to the effect that don't you ever try and do that again.
So and that was when we had Chu visiting from the Malaysian hotel worker who we'd befriended that summer in Baton Rouge. Ladies and gentlemen, stick with us. We'll be right back. Again, ladies and gentlemen, today we have Neil Vogler with us today, my dad, who raised my 4 brothers and myself. Spent most of his career with BASF in corporate America. We were gypsies who moved every year or two. We used to joke amongst family and friends that we were just 2 steps ahead of the FBI or the tax authorities. Everyone always assumed we were military folks. But I wanted to acknowledge, Dad, that you and Mom, raising 5 boys in a very middle-class Midwestern family at the time, still exposed us to really great global people and experiences, really a very international global worldview you afforded each of us. And it certainly influenced my life and my career. And I want to thank you for that. I don't know. I mean, we had an exchange student from the Philippines when we lived in Grozio. We had Joby, and then we had Chu, as you mentioned, from Malaysia. And then, of course, the Araskans when we were in Chicago, who've remained very dear in our family's lives. I wonder if you might talk a little bit about the global view that we have, if we do. Do you feel that that was just coincidental or accidental, or was it deliberate by you and Mom to expose your family and yourselves to different cultures and different people?
Just thinking, having met Ben and Willie Walsh and Mert and Alana Raskin was just meeting and molding of just really a great friendship. Ben and Willie had a couple daughters. Unfortunately, one was a stewardess.
Who passed early. Yeah.
Passed early, and it wasn't an accident or whatever. It was disease or unfortunate. We just as a couples, we just hit it off very well. And
what would you say made it special? I sort of made light of bridge, but I think that shared love of bridge was one thing.
It was. I mean,
and certainly you had large families each.
Well, it was when you think about families, it was maybe you guys were their surrogate children while they were here. I said Ben and Willie were here because the Erasmus kids were going to school in England, as we talked about earlier. That's about it. Too.
Yeah, that's all right. Yeah. That's good. Dad, just a couple last questions if you fill up for it. I wonder, there's an old adage that when nobody regrets having not worked hard enough on their deathbed. Do you have any regrets about having worked too hard, or is there anything you would have done differently based on the life you lived, which strikes me as been very full and generous?
Yeah.
You can be snarky if you want.
No. I guess looking back, I wish I could spend.
It's all right. Spent what? It's all right.
More time with you guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Do you think that you're different than your peers, or that's kind of how men? Because it was men that were the breadwinners then, usually.
Yeah. No.
I felt you were pretty present for what it's worth.
Okay. I'm saying I wish I had spent more time.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing that you may say, I don't have the time, but we'll all encounter circumstances. You can be saying that there's no way in hell I can do it, but the circumstance, what would I say? I don't care what you say, you've got to do it, and you do it.
Yeah.
And
you make the time.
You make the time.
There you go, for that which matters. So Dad, one last sort of thought here. You were raised by very strict German Protestant parents in rural northern Michigan. And frankly, were a bit intimidating for me as a kid. And now here we are. I learn as you've entered hospice that in fact, your father, we've talked about cremation and having some of your ashes spread at a preserve that was named in your father's honor, the Neil Vogler Conservation Area in Presque Isle, Michigan. I had no idea that your father was that kind of conservationist or that such a place even existed. What role did nature play in your family in the outdoors?
My dad was a hunter. I remember as a kid growing up, he would go out in the hunting, and he would bring home a fox, which he'd shot. He'd spin them. I remember he used an ironing board down in the basement of the house.
To skin them.
Yeah, and he was a sportsman.
Mm-hmm.
He and my brother-in-law Donnie, my dad, my sister were very active and formed the Sportsman's Club.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was very active with the city in activities that I think Kiwanis Club and
mm-hmm.
But with the Sportsman's Club, they built the in
the preserve area.
In the old days, Rogers City area, northern Michigan was a lot of logging,
mm-hmm.
and just some things that come up that
A lot of things are destroyed, or
Yeah, a lot of things are tried. I'm thinking there was a state highway, M68, between Rogers City and the nearest town of any size would have been Onaway. There, M68, and there's a local river, which Akak River, and Akak Falls, whatever.
Is that where the preserve is?
Now I'm trying to think. Just I'm losing my train of thought.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's all right. But your dad's conservation area was named in his honor, out of his
well, I'm
respect for
back
nature.
to the nature and logging. The M60 between Rogers City and Onaway. For the longest time, I remember it was a dirt road, even though it was a state highway. Then it got paved, and while they're doing some work, they were going to straighten the road out. There's one curve, and at the bend in the road, there was a remaining single pine tree that
had not been logged.
That had not been logged. I mean, it was huge, and they were going to cut that down. And the conservation department, as well as my dad, said no.
Wow.
They never changed the road.
So he's a bit of a tree hugger, but as a hunter as well.
Yeah.
That was such a cool story. I never knew that about your dad. And I'm honored that it's named in his honor, and that we can celebrate that.
Well, yeah, and a lot of the sportsman's club and stuff like that is right in the same area.
Yep.
And as I said, Dad and just a small group really put the whole thing together.
Real visionaries.
Yeah.
Well, it'll be an honor to share some of your ashes there. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank my dad, Neil Vogler, for joining us today on The Caring Economy, sharing some of his insights and experiences as a corporate gypsy, working in the 60s, 70s, and 80s in America, and then reflections on life in general. Dad, you get the last word. What say you?
It's enough for today.
There you go. Thank you. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Toby Usnik, The Caring Economy. Thanks, Dad. Love you.